Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 42 Courses podcast. We're always delighted to have listeners and viewers these days as everything goes out on YouTube. And my name's Louise and today I'm very pleased to be speaking with Nigel Taberner, who has literally faced life and death in negotiations, emerged with lessons that can transform how we lead, how we persuade, how we connect with others. And I really can't wait to dive into some of his stories that he's got and how we can use his insights in our work environments. He's an expert in leadership, persuasion, body language. And Nigel, you are very welcome to our 42 Courses podcast.
Thank you very much. It's great to be with you. What's the weather like over on your side of the water? We've got another snow day.
It's frosty here, but here we've done close to the sea, so very rare to have snow here, Nigel. But I've seen fantastic photos all over the UK.
Oh, well, greetings from the northwest of England.
You're very welcome. So, Nigel, just to tell everybody else, we have had a chat prior to this. We met late last year and had a very good chat where you told me a lot about the work that you did. And maybe I could ask you to kick off sort of setting the scene about your early career motivation. What really drew you into what outsiders see as quite an intense world of hostage negotiation?
Yeah, so I joined the police at age 21. I joined my local force, which is the Greater Manchester Police. I'd only ever wanted to be a police officer from being about 6. It's all I ever wanted to do. But I was your typical teenage boy. I didn't exactly overperform at school. I switched on about 6 months before my O-levels, completely blew them. So instead of joining the police at 18 and whistling through the ranks, I was working in a bus building factory in Wigan. Wasn't what I wanted. I was having to redo exams at night school because I still wanted to join the police. And luckily, at age 21, that was what I did. I joined GMP. Got posted in Moss Side in the early 90s, which was a tough area to work in. But probably some of the best years of my service I spent in Moss Side with a great team. We had amazing supervision. We would run through walls for them. And it was, I say, a tough environment. At the time, it was called the Bronx of Britain, Gunchester. And, there was a lot of young lads lost their lives in tit-for-tat shootings and stabbings in the time that I was there. But it was a great place to work until I learned your trade. So I spent some time there. It wasn't exciting enough, so I went to the riot squad for some time. Before I decided it was time to grow up, get promoted, get a proper job, and move down to Manchester Airport. And I worked down there in a counter-terrorism role for probably most of my career in one guise or another after that. And it was while I was working down there that I walked into work one morning and turned the computer on, and there it was, the advert for a hostage negotiator. Now, this is an additional role, so there's no such thing, or there are very few full-time hostage negotiators. You think about it, we spend a lot of time sat in the office with our feet up on the desk waiting for a job coming in. So you do it in addition to your day job. So at this point, I was detective sergeant, detective inspector in counter-terrorism policing by day, and then doing this added responsibility. Well, I looked at this application form, and I just thought, that is the job for me. It's just perfect. When I think about why I joined the police, kind of what my drivers were, it ticked every single box for me. I joined the police for a couple of reasons. I wanted to fight high-level crime, and I wanted to protect vulnerable people. And I looked at it and thought, yes, that's the job for me.
And one of the biggest misconceptions I had about the role, which when we chatted last year, you elaborated a little bit more on this, is, the sort of Hollywood view of the hostage negotiator is, bring in the hostage negotiator. And that is the job. And you very much sort of grounded me in terms of your description, where you say, no, we're going about our 9 to 5, and you could be, you've done a whole day's work, gone home for your dinner, and then 3 o'clock in the morning, in comes the call. Tell us a little bit about, that both was was that your perception of the role going into it? And how do you manage that environment when even you yourself are probably quite tired, maybe confused yourself because you've woken up in the night?
Yeah. So before I actually started to do the job, I think I had that kind of false perception that that it was going to be kind of a really kind of high octane, enjoyable job. You go to some good places and do some interesting things. Most of the time, it just took me out in the rain with substandard gear. There's nothing glamorous about it at all. It was. I think very, very quickly when I went on that first hostage negotiators course, I realised the sort of incidents you're going to be involved in and the environments you're going to be working with. And to be honest, sometimes the sort of people that you were working with, you realise there was no glamour in it at all. It's not like the Negotiator. In the slightest little bit, I don't think I ever wore a suit. I was mainly in Gore-Tex jackets and walking boots. So yeah, it was tough, but yeah, the whole thing about sort of having to get up. Most jobs are in the middle of the night, so I would do my day job. I'd be in the office 9 till 5. I'd drive back home. It'd be a 1-hour commute back home, and the number of times I was coming up the slip road to come off the motorway, on my phone would go, "Nigel, can you come back? We've got a job." So you'd be spinning back round, deploying for 6 or 7 hours to an incident, and then coming back home, hoping to get a couple of hours sleep before you went into work the following morning.
So that sort of beggars the question, Nigel, what is it then about that role that really appealed to you, that, that makes somebody stick with it?
It was a role that fulfilled me. I felt like I was achieving something. I deployed to just over 130 incidents in a 10-year period. That's 130 lives saved. 130 lives impacted in a really positive way in a variety of different settings and environments and with different challenges. So I think of all the things I did when I was in policing, and I had some great jobs when I was there, it was the one thing where you came home at the end of a deployment with a smile on your face. No matter how tough it had been, no matter how difficult that deployment had been, no matter how close you thought at times you'd come to losing somebody, you knew that, there's nothing quite like after a negotiation, putting your arm around somebody and walking them to a police car or walking them to an ambulance or whatever it is, and thinking, maybe, just maybe we've turned this person's life around, and things are going to come good from them.
That's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, in those environments, we automatically think of the victim, the person who's having the trouble. But the fact is that the person who has helped them is also walking away with a great sort of emotional and mental reward.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really difficult, some aspects of it. I mean, one of the most difficult things that I had to come to terms with, that after you'd negotiate with somebody, you never heard from them ever again. So you could be involved in a 12-hour negotiation with somebody, actually get quite close to them. But your job was to save a life there and then. And and then it's the next one. It wasn't exactly a sausage factory, but it was that kind of thing. You never got any feedback about how things had worked out. You could negotiate with a teenager who's having difficulties, and you never knew how things had actually worked out for them. And that was tough. And I suppose you kind of felt like every deployment you went to, you left a little bit of yourself there.
Yeah, in negotiation, in trust, presumably is everything, and that's certainly something that's for you in the real world, but also something that people bring into very hugely into business, into politics, really into everything. And often I would imagine emotions are running high. States in the business world aren't exactly life-threatening, but I mean in politics it can be very on the line. What is your advice to give to leaders looking to establish trust with teams or clients? Or
so hostage negotiation, I'm going to do yourself out of a job here. Hostage negotiation is not difficult. It's really not. Once you've got your head around a couple of sort of concepts, it's not difficult at all. The first thing at all is it's not a negotiation. I go speaking to businesses all the time. They tie themselves in knots. We're going into a negotiation. We're having a negotiation. No, you're not. You're having a conversation with a purpose. You're having a meaningful conversation. Okay, sometimes they're a little bit tough, but that is all it is. I get people saying to me all the time, well, we're currently in negotiations with Tesco. No, you're not. You're having a conversation with a purpose with Jenny and Steve, who happen to work for Tesco. So the first thing to do is get this whole thing about negotiation out of your head. It's a meaningful conversation. If I'm talking to somebody and he's waving a gun around, if I can ignore the fact that he's got a gun in his hand, it's a conversation between me and another guy. So why overcomplicate it? The other thing is in terms of the process of getting somebody to change the behavior, which is what negotiation is all about influencing behavior and getting people to do things differently. There's 3 really easy steps. Get them to like you, get them to trust you, and now you've actually earned the right to be able to influence them. People think that hostage negotiators go in at the top end. We've got this suite of Jedi mind tricks that we're going to use to just get you to do things differently in the blink of an eye. We're going to trick you to do things differently. No. A good negotiator knows that all that hard work, all the hard yards is done at the bottom. Get them to like you and get them to trust you. Trust is absolutely critical. The one thing that a hostage negotiator will never do is lie. No matter how tough it is, no matter how much pain I'm going to get in the short term, I'm never going to tell somebody a lie. Because we work really hard to get somebody to trust us, and then we guard it jealously. To extremes. We really guard it jealously. I heard a great quote about trust a few months ago now. It said that trust arrives on foot, but it leaves on horseback. It takes a long, long time. It can be really tough to get somebody to trust you. But if you blow it, it's gone. It's racing off across that paddock, and the chances of getting anywhere near it again are so slim.
That's a great quote, Nigel. We'll find out.
I didn't know where it's come from, but it's an absolute beauty.
It's fantastic. Yeah.
But the great thing about trust is that if you get somebody to trust you, they will open up. They will tell you things. They will tell you things that they never otherwise would. And it just makes that conversation so much easier. My job is to get you talking and to keep you talking. Because if I can get you talking and keep you talking, you will tell me things that you never intended to tell me. Because no matter what anybody might say, you can't control what comes out your mouth. If you give people enough room in the conversation, they will fill it. So you're telling me all this stuff. I'm managing the conversation so that you're talking more than me. It's all about you. You're telling me all this stuff that you wouldn't otherwise do. And all the time as a negotiator, I'm thinking, what did she say? What did she mean? How can I use it? And that is why hostage negotiators are so successful. We manage a conversation and we listen like a life depends on it. And people pretty much work the rest out for themselves. We might do a little bit of reframing. We might do a little bit of problem solving, but that's the top 2%. The rest of the time is all relationship building and managing a conversation so that you're the one doing the talking.
And that very first stage, Nigel, you said, in a business environment, really, we're all just having a chat. But the important thing you said is you've got to get people to like you. And I mean, we all deal with difficult people or people we struggle to connect with, or that first hurdle sounds so simple, but can be very challenging. Do you force yourself to find something you like about this person, or is it finding things in common, using the same language, when they cross legs?
So you hit the nail on the head there with finding a connection. Find something that connects you, especially if you're dealing with somebody who is a right rotter, somebody you think you've got nothing in common with whatsoever. Just find something that connects you. That can really break down barriers. Get people talking about themselves. People love to talk about themselves. In business, people love to talk about the businesses. So get them doing stuff like that. Throw a little bit of flattery in, nice shoes. People love a bit of flattery, but then give them room in the conversation. So yeah, it's about keeping a focus on them. Get them talking, keep them talking, get them talking about themselves. And with regard to yourself, just make sure that you're expressing two things. And the first one is warmth, and the second one is competence. Not confidence, because we've all worked with people who can fake it to make it. Are you a good person? Are your intentions good? And are you high performing? Because if you do that first impression that somebody actually, do you know what? He's a good bloke. He's a really nice fella. His intentions are good, and he knows what he's talking about. Then that is the sort of first impression you want to create. We put horns and halos on people very, very quickly. We decide in the blink of an eye whether we trust them, whether we like them, whether we think they're capable or not. So you walk in there being the best version of you, no matter who you're talking to, no matter how horrible they may be. You go in there showing that you're warm, showing that your intentions are good, and showing that you can do what it says on the tin. That's where you need to start. Then we get them talking. Then we develop that trust. Now I've actually earned the right to be able to get you to change your behaviour. Anything short of that is just cheap 1980s car sales tactics, and it doesn't work anymore.
But in a way, Nigel, you're simplifying obviously a technique that you're very good at, but these things aren't necessarily easy for other people. Let's talk about listening, for example.
Yeah.
Just because I'm listening to what you're saying doesn't mean I've necessarily understood what you're saying. And so in your environment where you're listening to people in obviously very high stress situations, how do you make sure you've understood correctly what it is that they're feeding back to you?
Yeah. Okay. So it's about having an inquisitive mindset. People say to me all the time, Nigel, how do you listen to somebody for 12, 14 hours? After 5 minutes, I've switched off. I'm on the beach. My mind's all over the place. It's about having an inquisitive mindset. It's about wanting to know what people's why is. When I go to an incident, I'm not particularly bothered about what somebody's doing and how they're doing it. I want to know why. I want to dig deep. I want to follow the white rabbit. I would love to sit down with the likes of a GP who drove a 4x4 packed with gas cylinders at the Glasgow airport years ago to kill men, women and children. A GP. Why? Of all people. So it's about exploring those whys and getting invested in people's stories. My job as a negotiator is to get you to tell me your story and then listen to understand. We're really poor at listening to understand. We're either listening, most of the time when we're listening for one thing. That's a gap in the conversation. Because then it's my turn. That's all I'm waiting for. You say something, it's funny. I know something, it's funnier. I'm just sat here waiting for you to finish so I can go, yeah, but do you know what? And then it's my go. So we kind of listen almost competitively. But the main thing we do is we listen to make sense of things from our perspective, not the perspective of the other person. We kind of listen autobiographically. We're listening to somebody and thinking, they must feel like this because that is how I would feel in that situation. So we don't listen to understand. So you say you're sad. I know what sad feels like to me. I have no idea what sad feels like for you unless I actually ask you to articulate it and I'll listen. But we rarely do that. We normally sit there going, oh yeah, I understand. Oh, that's terrible. I understand. No, you don't understand. You can't even begin to understand what it's like for other people. So that's the key skill of a hostage negotiator. That's the hostage negotiator's superpower. It's what makes them different. They listen. And why is it so good for them? Because nobody else does it. You can always tell when somebody's not listening because they'll say to you, "Go on, I'm listening." If somebody says to you, "Go on, I'm listening," they're not listening. I can tell you that now. They're on the phone. Yeah, go on, I'm listening. or they're tapping away on a computer. Go on, go on. I am listening. They're not. You can't be. You can't multitask. It's impossible.
Yes, you mentioned at the start of that you were inherently curious. I mean, curiosity is something we're always talking about in our field. But can you learn to be curious, or is this the type of thing just that people who are inherently curious are good at? Can you be interested in, or is it literally a quality of a person?
I think you can train yourself to do it. You know, everybody who becomes a hostage negotiator isn't a great hostage negotiator from day one. It's something that you can develop and you can grow into. And you know, in my world, once you've been burnt a few times off somebody for not listening, you suddenly realise how important it is. But we learn as negotiators, we learn that really, really quickly. Because when we're on the courses that we go through, a lot of it is role play based. We say role plays, they're nothing like role plays, but it's scenario based. You're in class all day, and then you're thrown into this crazy scenario in the evening, and we negotiate against negotiators, and we play for keeps. The toughest negotiations I've been involved in were not operational negotiations. There were negotiations that took place in training, and you suddenly switch on very, very quickly, and you realise the importance of being able to listen to somebody. And it's not just about listening, it's listening to understand, listening and interpreting what they're saying. What does it mean for them? Sometimes, what are they not actually saying? You know, actually, you say I'm fine, but really? What's the body language saying? I've got to be honest, I'm not massive on body language. The whole thing about micro expressions and all that is a little bit lost on me. But it's when somebody's body language isn't congruent with what they're saying that you start to think, hang on, I need to dig a little bit deeper there. I need to get them talking about that. I need to keep the focus on them.
And in a business environment, I mean, we're often, as we are here today, Nigel, now we're often chatting with people on screens where, I mean, as you were saying, that whole thing about body language anyway is often a little bit harder to read. It's, with the different skill of, as we're working here today, very much waiting for your moment to speak because of the crossover. So sort of learn different communication skills. And I know you said, micro expressions, things like that in relation to body language. But how much do you think we can read in terms of knowing if somebody's with you, even if we're just talking about the sort of the tension in their shoulder or the tightness in their face? And can you feed that back to somebody? Can you say to someone, I see you're not quite comfortable with that, or is that something you would do at all?
Yeah, absolutely. You can always tell when somebody's not with you, when somebody's not listening, when somebody's distracted. You can always tell, and there are tactics that you can use, and the one that use that. I mean, I see that you're not quite with me. It is that's fair enough line. We would tend to use something like, I get the impression that you're really struggling with this.
Okay.
I get the impression that what I've said to you didn't quite ring true with you.
Okay.
And then let them articulate it. And if they go, yeah, just go, oh, tell me about it then.
Okay.
I mean, hostage...
use any environment, can't it, Nigel?
Absolutely.
That'd be helpful.
Absolutely. I'm a firm believer if you say, I get the impression, you can stick anything on the end of that. It's very difficult to take offense. It's such a nice phrase, and it's difficult to argue with because it's the impression that I'm getting. It's non-judgmental.
Yeah.
It takes my turn in the conversation, and now it's yours, and you're going to tell me about that. And if you don't, you just go, yeah, then I'm just going to go, oh, tell me about it. So if we're going to ask a question, we're going to ask good questions. People ask rubbish questions. We try to discourage negotiators from using questions because we're so poor at it. So if you're going to ask a good question, if you ask a question, ask a good one, a tell me, show me, explain to me, describe to me question, rather than closed questions that we revert to a lot of the time, or just what did you do? How did you do it? open questions, yeah, but they're a little bit lame. There's better questions we can use.
And obviously, you speak to a huge range of different people, with bringing your skills into their area. And we've just been talking mainly about sort of business environments, maybe when you're on a one-on-one with somebody talking about, I don't know, negotiating a business deal or something like that. What are the other environments, do you think, in our day-to-day life that we can use these skills? Or is it all over our lives?
The great thing, and what became really apparent to me on the first week of our hostage negotiators course, and what still really excites me today, is that it touches every single it impacts every single area of your life. It impacts work. It impacts home. It impacts when you need to renew your Sky package, or whatever it is. The skills are exactly the same. I mean, for example, the last 4 or 5 weeks, I've worked doing conferences for big international companies, doing stuff for them on influence and persuasion. I've been into special schools who work with children excluded from mainstream education, working with teachers in there to be able to communicate better and be able to handle the emotions of the people that they work with. And then I'll come home and I'll use it on my kids.
Okay.
You know, it works on everybody. Why? Because actually it's good communication skills. It's good communication skills and using those to influence people to change their behavior. And in a way, and this is the knack, you've got to make it sound like you're having a normal, natural conversation.
And you talked about back at the beginning, the training environment and how intense it is, and then you're negotiating with negotiators. Is it very much a active, hands-on experience, or are there particular books that they advise you? Like, is it like Chris Voss classic, or are there ones that everyone says you really must read this, or you must follow this person?
Yeah, so I mean, Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference. If anybody wants to know any more about this stuff, Never Split the Difference is a great place to start a good book. And then there's other books as well. If you want to know about influence, Robert Cialdini has written a book called Influence. Again, that's a really good book if that's specifically what you want to know about. But you learn this stuff by doing it. So there are models and theories that sit behind what I'm doing. So I'm aware of those. I'm going in there with a negotiation strategy. I know where I am now. I know where I want to get to. I've got a rough idea of how I'm going to get there. But it's all about people. It's all about people. It's all about relationship building. It's all about building trust. So actually now I'm in a position where I can start to influence. And very often they've got the answers. It's just a matter of teasing it out of them. And getting them to change their behavior that way.
Well, it's really fascinating chatting with you, Nigel. I really feel you very sort of concisely put together skills that can be useful, as you say, both in the boardroom, as it were, and in life. It's really great talking to you. And I wonder if there's any sort of like one piece of advice you'd like to leave listeners with, something that they can actually maybe apply in their daily lives in terms of whether it's improved with active listening or using certain phrases to encourage people to, bring more of themselves out.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to become a better negotiator, if you want to become more influential, become a better listener. That's the hostage negotiator's superpower. That is what makes them different. We miss out on so much information because when somebody's talking, we're sitting there thinking about what we're going to say in response. Instead of actually sitting there, listening to what they're saying, interpreting what they're saying, and then using that information to be able to influence them to do things differently. So if you want to become a better negotiator, then become a better listener. It's not about how persuasively you can speak. It's not about how silver-tongued you are. It's about how good you are at listening. That is the mark of a good negotiator.
Fabulous. That's really good advice. So we're moving forward. We empty our minds and just listen. Don't be formulating that's hard in these environments where I'm trying to think, what else do I need to ask Nigel? But still,
and the other thing is, it's a team sport, and negotiation is a team sport. There's no such thing as the hostage negotiator.
Yeah.
So have a good team around you, a team that understands what you're trying to achieve, knows what the negotiation strategy is, knows what the role is within that setup. You only get through these really difficult, high-octane negotiations with a really good team wrapped around you.
Okay, fantastic. So if our listeners want to learn more about this, as you say, you've mentioned those books. What about yourself, Nigel, in terms of learning more about your work or following you on social, or is there anywhere if people want to get in touch and learn more?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm always open for a chat on LinkedIn, or my website, nigeltaberner.com, www.nigeltaberner.com, and get in touch. And it'd be lovely to hear from some of your listeners.
Fantastic. We'll put all of those in the notes to this podcast. And thank you so much for sharing your time with me, Nigel, this morning, and all of your wisdom with us today. It's really been a privilege. Thank you so much indeed, Nigel.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this 42 Courses podcast. If you did, please like and share. Any comments are also very, very welcome. And of course, if you want to learn more about us, visit our website at 42courses.com. Thanks again.